This is Battletech Declassified. Modern Warfare Explained. On July 8th, at the NATO summit in Ankara, President Trump told Ukraine it could build its own Patriot missiles. Not buy them, build them, on its own soil, with American blueprints. It sounded like the kind of announcement that ends a war. Here is the problem. The single American factory that makes the radar seeker inside every Patriot Interceptor delivered about 650 of them last year. Ukraine, if it wants to properly defend its cities, may need up to 2,000 interceptors a year. A license to build something and the actual ability to build it are two completely different things. And today, we find out exactly why that gap is so hard to close and why almost every country that depends on this missile is fighting over the same bottleneck. This is the economics behind one of the most consequential promises of the year, and almost nobody explaining it actually understands what a Patriot Interceptor requires to exist in the first place. Start with what Ukraine is actually dealing with. Russia has been escalating its ballistic missile attacks against Kyiv and other cities, sometimes launching 30 in a single night, mixed with cruise missiles and drone swarms specifically designed to stretch Ukrainian air defense crews thin. The Patriot is currently the only Western system capable of intercepting a ballistic missile in its terminal phase, the last few seconds before impact. Ukraine is regularly shooting down 90% of drones and cruise missiles headed its way. Ballistic missiles are a different story. Roughly 2 out of every 3 get through, and in one recent attack, Ukraine failed to intercept 23 ballistic missiles at once. That is the shortage Trump's announcement is trying to solve. To understand why this is so hard to fix, you first need to understand what a PAC-3 interceptor actually does, and honestly, how strange the whole idea is once you slow down and look at it. It does not explode near its target the way older missiles did. It uses something called hit-to-kill. A radar seeker in the nose of the missile locks onto the incoming warhead in its final seconds of flight. Tiny attitude control motors fire to fine-tune its exact trajectory, and the interceptor flies directly into the incoming missile at a closing speed of several thousand miles an hour. No warhead, no explosion, just precision collision. It is, quite literally, the process of hitting a bullet with a bullet and doing it reliably enough that armies stake entire cities on it. That precision is also exactly why it costs around $4 million per missile, and why the manufacturing tolerances involved cannot simply be handed to a new factory and expected to work on day one. To put that number in context, a full Patriot battery, meaning the radar, the launchers, the control station, and a complete load of missiles, runs somewhere around $1 billion total. About $400 million of that is the hardware itself. The remaining $690 million is just the missiles sitting in the launcher ready to fire. Here is where the economics get genuinely uncomfortable. Russia has been sending waves of cheap exploding drones at Ukrainian cities, drones that can cost as little as a few tens of thousands of dollars to build. Every time one of those gets shot down by a $4 million interceptor, Ukraine wins the battle and loses the trade. You cannot sustainably defend a country by spending 100 times more on your defense than your opponent spends on the attack. The U.S. Army has actually noticed this exact problem. It is currently asking defense contractors to design a stripped-down Patriot interceptor priced under $1 million, specifically to handle cheaper threats like drones and short-range rockets. So the $4 million interceptor can be saved for the threats that actually require that level of precision, like an incoming ballistic missile. That program alone tells you how badly the original Patriot's economics have started to break down against the kind of warfare Ukraine is actually facing. So why can't Ukraine just start building these tomorrow? Because a Patriot interceptor is not one product. It is the output of a supply chain running through more than 400 separate companies, each one responsible for a component that cannot simply be swapped for something else. Seekers, solid rocket motors, guidance software, thermal batteries, composite materials, specialized test equipment, and a certification process at the end of it that confirms the missile will actually detonate at the right moment against a target moving several times the speed of sound. The single worst bottleneck sits at a Boeing facility in Huntsville, Alabama. That one building produces the active radar seeker for every PAC-3 interceptor the United States makes. In 2025, it delivered somewhere between 650 and 700 of them, total, for the entire country. The Pentagon signed a framework back in April to triple that output, which tells you everything about how badly stretched the current capacity already is. The solid rocket motor is its own separate bottleneck too, built by a single supplier, because there simply are not multiple companies in America capable of building rocket motors to this exact specification. This is not laziness or bureaucracy. Facilities like this require specialized machinery that takes years to install, a workforce with security clearances that takes months to process, and a quality control process where a single flawed weld or a fraction of a millimeter of tolerance error can mean the missile misses a target closing at several times the speed of sound. You cannot simply throw money at that problem and expect a second factory to appear next year. Money buys steel and buildings quickly. It does not buy trained technicians or approved suppliers quickly. Put those two bottlenecks together, and you get the real number behind this story. A single PAC-3 Interceptor can take up to 24 months to produce from start to finish, and some of the components inside it take around 30 months on their own. That means any decision made this year about ramping up production will not translate into meaningful missile counts until 2027 or 2028 at the earliest. Trump's license does not shorten that timeline. It just decides who eventually gets to build on top of it. If breakdowns like this are your kind of rabbit hole, subscribe now. New long-form episodes every Wednesday, new Decoded episodes every Saturday. So, what does Ukraine actually get out of a license if the missiles are still years away? Realistically, not full sovereign production on day one. Most defense analysts expect a phased model instead. American companies stay involved in supervision. Key components keep getting imported rather than built from scratch in Ukraine. European industrial partners help absorb some of the manufacturing load, and Ukrainian involvement grows gradually, starting with assembly and testing, rather than building a seeker factory from nothing under wartime conditions. There is also a harder problem nobody likes saying out loud. Building Patriot components inside Ukraine turns that factory into a high-value target. Russia has made no secret of hunting Patriot batteries already deployed in the field. A production facility, fixed in place and impossible to hide, would represent an enormous intelligence and strike priority the moment it started operating. So even the countries most eager to help Ukraine build this capability are quietly weighing whether some of that production should sit somewhere safer, inside a NATO member with existing air defense industry, rather than inside Ukraine itself. Ukraine has actually already been trying to solve this problem on its own, separate from the American license entirely. Ukrainian engineers have been developing a domestic interceptor of their own, one that is reportedly aerodynamically ready to fly, but still not combat capable, because it depends on radars, command centers, a secure data link, and a seeker head that Ukraine does not yet manufacture itself and is currently sourcing from European partners. It is a reminder that even when a country builds its own missile body, the hardest parts, the sensors and the guidance brain, are usually the parts nobody can simply replicate on their own timeline. Europe is pursuing its own answer too. Germany, France, and Norway are jointly developing an alternative system called Freya, specifically because relying entirely on a single American supply chain for the continent's missile defense has started to look like a strategic vulnerability rather than a convenience. None of these programs are fast. All of them exist because the bottleneck we just described is not going away on its own. And Ukraine is not the only country waiting in line. Poland has a $4.75 billion contract for 4 batteries and over 200 interceptors. Switzerland committed $2.2 billion for 5 fire units. Romania signed for 7 units at $3.9 billion. Germany placed an order for up to 600 PAC-3 MSE missiles alone at $5 billion. Saudi Arabia has a pending request for over 700 interceptors worth roughly $9 billion, driven by years of missile and drone attacks on its own territory. Every one of those countries is drawing from the same 400-company supply chain and the same single seeker factory in Alabama. Every additional country added to that queue pushes everyone else's delivery timeline further out, Ukraine included. A license to build does not create new capacity by itself. It just gives Ukraine a seat at a table where the line is already years long, with billions of dollars of standing orders already ahead of it. Here is the part that makes this bigger than one country's air defense problem. Ukraine currently operates around 7 Patriot systems total, 3 supplied directly by the United States, 3 from Germany, and at least 1 more from a group of European allies pooling resources together. Every one of those interceptors comes out of the same limited global production base. The U.S. produces roughly 600 interceptors a year for its own stockpiles, commitments to nearly 20 other nations, and now potentially Ukraine as well. Meanwhile, Russia has more than doubled its own production of comparable long-range missiles, with over 480 planned for this year alone. The country building interceptors, slower than its adversary builds missiles to intercept, is not in a sustainable position, license or no license. This is Decoded, the series where we break down the real cost behind the systems everyone else just calls impressive. New episode every Saturday. That is why this story is not really about a license at all. It is about whether the country that invented this technology can actually scale its own supply chain fast enough to matter, for itself and for the roughly 20 allies now depending on the exact same production line. Trump handing Ukraine the right to build Patriots is a genuinely significant political moment. But political permission does not build a rocket motor, and it does not train the specialized workforce needed to manufacture a radar seeker to a tolerance measured in fractions of a millimeter. Those things take years regardless of who signs off on them, and no announcement at a summit changes how long it physically takes to qualify a new supplier or clear a new technician. There is also a longer game hiding underneath all of this. If Ukraine does eventually stand up even a partial production line, with European help and American oversight, it changes Ukraine's position after the war ends, whenever that turns out to be. A country that can build part of its own air defense system is a very different kind of ally and a very different kind of NATO candidate than a country that has to ask for everything. That is likely part of why this offer landed the way it did, not just as emergency support, but as a foundation for what Ukraine's defense industry looks like for the next several decades, assuming the components, the workforce, and the timeline all eventually come together the way the announcement implied they would. So the headline promise and the technical reality are both true at the same time. Ukraine really has been given the right to build one of the most advanced air defense systems on Earth. And that right will not put a single additional interceptor in the sky before 2027, at the earliest, no matter how badly it is needed tonight. That gap between political announcement and industrial reality is where most modern defense stories actually live, and understanding it tells you more about how wars get fought and how alliances get built than any press conference ever will. If you want the next system decoded like this one, subscribe and drop a comment with what you want broken down next. This has been BattleTech Declassified, made to listen, no screen required.